Hi, welcome to the Simcoe County Archives. My name's Jen Huddleston, and I'm the Private Collections Archivist.
And I'm Olivia White, the Digital Preservation Archivist.
At the Simcoe County Archives, we have a goal to collect, preserve, and make accessible the documentary heritage of the County of Simcoe. We collect records from private citizens, and we also take in the corporate and municipal records from the County of Simcoe and the lower tier municipalities.
It's October now, and to get into the spirit, we thought it would be fun to highlight some of our collections and resources for researching spookier topics.
A couple of years ago for Halloween, we actually put together a guide for researching ghosts and hauntings using archival records, and it was actually really popular. It's still available on our website today. So we've known for a while that there's a community interest in these topics, trying to figure out a supernatural thing using archival records.
So with that in mind, we've pulled some of our best resources for researching ghosts and hauntings. We're going to be looking at land and property records, family histories and genealogies, our newspaper collections, and our private collections.
So believe it or not, we've actually had quite a number of ghost hunters come into the archives before to look at our records. And a major area of interest for them is property history. They're usually looking to answer questions like, when was my house built? Who lived here before? And a little more tricky to determine, did anything ever happen here? So using land and property records, we can answer actually a couple of those questions. So I'm going to go through a few of them that would be of use if you're trying to confirm a haunting. So establishing an exact date a property was built can actually be very difficult, but we do have municipal records at the archives that can help. One would be tax assessments. So using a tax assessment, you can make an educated guess to determine whether or not a property was built in a given year. Another resource that we have we have maps and atlases. So for example, this is a map of Tiny from the 1800s, and you can see different properties and their uses are outlined here in this map. We also have things like fire insurance plans, which can be really interesting because they will not only show where a property was, but often what type of property was in a given place, and sometimes even what it was built from, so whether or not it was made of wood or brick or what have you. So that can be really interesting to learn kind of general information about a property. A really fantastic resource that we always encourage people to go to almost first when they're starting out doing property history research is the Ontario Land Registry Access Portal, which is known as On Land. It's actually a free resource that anybody can access online, and it has digitized copies of historic title abstracts for properties. So these title abstracts will show every date the property was bought and sold, and it'll also include names of those who are doing the buying and selling. So this is a great way to get an idea of who was living in a property at a given time. So again, that's something anybody can access online. You don't have to come to the archives to use that resource, but we're happy to show people how to use it at the archives if you come in here. So another resource that we have for doing property research would be photographs. And these photos here are from our Livingstone collection. Primarily they are photos of buildings in Barrie. So photos can be a great reference point. Obviously you can see different things that have changed about a property over time. One thing I would say though, for residential properties is most of the time when we get a photo donated to us, it's not actually identified as 12 Mary Street. It just wouldn't say that. What it will say is the Johnstons family. And it'll have a picture of Mr. and Mrs. Johnson out front or something like that. Or the picture on the back, it'll just say Grandma's house. So that doesn't give us a lot in terms of the address. We don't exactly know. So for that reason, it's really, really useful to get that list of names of people who have lived historically in the property from the title abstract, because then you can be searching for the address in the archives, and that's one access point, but you can also be searching for the family names in the archives, which is another access point. And with both of them, you're going to get hopefully more results, different records that you can look at.
After conducting property research, you may be interested to learn a little bit more about the families that lived in the homes. So one great place to start is federal census records, and this is because they're organized by location, and they also contain a list of household members, including any boarders or employees employed workers in the home. They also contain information about occupations, ages, religion, whether or not someone was going to school at the time, and these are available to view online at the Library of Archives Canada's website up to the year 1931. Vital statistics are also a great resource because they contain information about births, deaths, and marriages, and while they are under the jurisdiction of the Archives of Ontario, we can provide access to open vital statistics records available through our library edition subscription to Ancestry on our reading room computers. Our private collections contain primary sources about many families in Simcoe County, but we also have a great reference collection filled with secondary sources, filled with family histories and things like that. So this is the Rakes family collection, which contains a lot of great diaries written by Walter and his son George, who lived in Oro Township in the 19th and 20th centuries. And just like any diary, they contain a lot of information about day-to-day activities, but unlike government records, they have a bit more personality and they're a bit more informal. So I'm going to read an entry from one of Walter's diaries from 1858. So this was written by Walter Rakes on October 31st, 1858, in which he says, "Dull morning but dry, DPW came out and we stayed at home all day." So this contains information a little bit about the weather. It also talks about who was visiting and what they did. So government records combined with private collections can paint a clearer picture about families and the daily things that they like to do.
So you've probably noticed so far that the resources we have talked about could really be applied to any kind of historical research. And they don't, I mean, you can use them if you want to try and confirm something spooky, but the records themselves are not spooky. We do have records here that are a little spookier. So I've pulled a selection of Tweedsmuir histories that we have from our Women's Institute records, and truthfully, these are also just amazing records for any kind of research. For example, for doing property history research, very often in Tweedsmuir histories, they would do a profile of a house. So that might include pictures taken by WI members, a profile of who lived out the property at a given point in time, may also talk about if it was a farm, sort of what they were producing. So there's a lot of information like that contained in Tweedsmuirs, but there's also things like ghost stories occasionally. So one example of that we have is in the Stroud WI Tweedsmuir. This was written in January of 1942. And the WI member who was recording this history wrote about a haunted property in Stroud, doesn't give the exact location, but identifies the ghost as a man named Fisher, who evidently met with foul play at some point and started appearing sitting on his own fence post after he had already passed, and terrifying children in the neighborhood. So you do find occasionally entries like this that obviously that's not an official record of any kind, but it does contain some interesting information, especially if you are more interested in something less official, maybe a little supernatural.
So here at the Archives, we have a fantastic newspaper collection with over 50 newspaper titles dating back as early as 1840. We have a lot of original hard copy versions, but we also have versions available on microfilm as well. And newspapers are a great resource for marriages, obituaries, but if you look a little closer, they can also contain interesting stories about ghosts and cryptids. So this is a newspaper article from the Barrie Examiner written July 1963, all about Igo Pogo, also known as Kempenfelt Kelly, who is said to be a sea serpent that lives within Lake Simcoe. Now, we also have two pictures of sturgeon here, which could be mistaken for a sea creature, though it is highly illegal to catch and keep sturgeon nowadays. There have been sightings of Igo Pogo reported as early as the 19th century, with a major sighting reported in 1952 by 4 witnesses, including Chief Wellington Charles of Georgina Island First Nation. Igo Pogo is a distant relative of Ogo Pogo, a sea serpent said to live within British Columbia, and she is described as a charcoal-colored serpent between 30 and 70 feet long. So we encourage everyone to look through newspapers here at the Archives because just like this news article here, you really never know what you might find.
So we hope you've enjoyed taking a look at some of the resources we have available to do historical research about ghosts or otherwise. If you're interested in coming to the Archives to take a look at our resources, you can book an appointment on our website.
You can also email us with questions at archives@simcoe.ca. Happy Halloween!